The thing about betrayal is that it always leaves breadcrumbs. My wife Lila had been dropping them for months, but I was too busy building custom cabinets and pretending our marriage wasn't rotting from the inside to notice. Until Friday night, when she forgot her second phone. "I'm heading out early tomorrow," Lila called from the bedroom, her voice carrying that artificial brightness she'd perfected over the past year. "Monica's picking me up at 7 for the spa weekend in Portland. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I looked up from my workbench in the garage where I'd been sanding a cherry wood entertainment center for the Hendersons. The smell of sawdust and wood stain usually calmed me, but something in her tone made my hands still on the sandpaper. "Since when do you go to spas?" I asked, stepping into the doorway between the garage and kitchen. Lila was shoving clothes into her designer overnight bag, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago when I still thought expensive gifts might bridge whatever gap was growing between us. She didn't look at me. "Since Monica got that promotion and decided we needed to celebrate, you know how she is." I knew how Monica was, all right. Lila's best friend since college, the kind of woman who treated other people's marriages like soap operas she could direct from the sidelines. Monica had been divorced twice by 35 and seemed to think everyone else should join her in the single life. "Oh, what spa?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Someplace in the old port. Very exclusive." Lila zipped the bag with more force than necessary. "You wouldn't know it." The dismissal in her voice hit me like a slap. After 15 years of marriage, she'd perfected the art of making me feel small without raising her voice. I watched her check her reflection in the hallway mirror, smoothing her auburn hair and adjusting her blouse. At 38, Lila was still beautiful in that sharp, architectural way that had first attracted me. Everything about her was precisely arranged, from her makeup to her career as a project manager at Riverside Design Associates. "Well, have fun," I said, turning back to my workbench. "Don't wait up," she replied, which struck me as odd since she was leaving in the morning. I heard her heels clicking across the hardwood floors, then the sound of her BMW starting in the driveway. Through the garage window, I watched her taillights disappear down Maple Street. Our neighborhood in Riverton was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business but pretended they didn't. Tree-lined streets, craftsman houses built in the 1920s, the sort of American dream that was supposed to mean something. I went back to sanding, letting the repetitive motion clear my head. The Henderson Entertainment Center was nearly finished, and I had 3 more custom pieces lined up for the next month. My woodworking business had grown steadily over the past decade, mostly through word of mouth and the kind of quality work that spoke for itself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work that paid well enough to keep us comfortable. Around midnight, I headed inside to lock up. That's when I saw it on the kitchen counter, Lila's iPhone. Not her personal phone, but the second one she claimed was for work emergencies. She'd had it for about 6 months, said the design firm required project managers to be available 24/7. I stared at the phone for a long moment. The smart thing would be to ignore it, maybe text her in the morning to let her know she'd forgotten it. But something about the whole spa weekend story felt wrong. Lila hated spas. She'd always said they were a waste of money, that she'd rather spend a weekend reading or working on her architectural sketches. The phone buzzed with a text message. The preview showed on the lock screen. "Can't wait for tomorrow night. Hotel's all set. V." My blood went cold. V? I picked up the phone, but of course it was password protected. I tried her birthday, our anniversary, even our old address. Nothing. I set the phone back down and walked to the window. Mrs. Coyle from next door was taking her garbage to the curb, despite the late hour. She waved when she saw me, and I opened the window. "Evening, Eliot," she called softly. "Working late again?" "Just finishing up," I replied. "You're up late, too." She glanced around conspiratorially, then stepped closer to the fence between our properties. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right with Lila? I saw that red car pick her up the other night around 1 a.m. Fancy thing? Looked expensive?" The world seemed to tilt slightly. "Red car?" "Tesla, I think. Monday night it was. She came out in quite a hurry, like she was sneaking out." Mrs. Coyle had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years and missed nothing. I only noticed because my cat was yowling and I couldn't sleep. "I'm sure it was just a work emergency," I managed to say. Mrs. Coyle nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't buying it any more than I was. "Well, good night, dear. Try to get some sleep." I closed the window and stood in the dark kitchen, staring at Lila's phone. A work emergency at 1 a.m. that required a Tesla pickup. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. I walked back to the garage and sat on my workbench stool, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always made sense to me. Wood was honest. You could see its flaws, work with its grain, create something beautiful and lasting if you had the patience and skill. Marriage, apparently, was different. The next morning, I made coffee and tried to act normal. Lila's phone sat on the counter, like evidence in a crime I wasn't ready to investigate. I had work to do, bills to pay, a life to maintain. But every time I looked at that phone, Mrs. Coyle's words echoed in my head. Around 10 a.m., I gave up pretending to focus on work. I grabbed Lila's phone and drove to Phil's Hardware, where my oldest friend was restocking paint supplies. "You look like hell," Phil said when I walked in. He'd known me since high school, back when we both thought we'd leave Riverton for bigger things. He'd inherited the hardware store from his father. I'd married Lila and started my woodworking business. We'd both stayed, but at least Phil seemed happy about it. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me," I said. Phil set down a can of primer and gave me his full attention. "Shoot. If someone wanted to unlock an iPhone, hypothetically, how would they do it?" Phil's expression shifted from curious to concerned. "Hypothetically?" "Lila forgot her work phone. She's at a spa weekend, and I thought maybe I should check if she has any urgent messages." Phil studied my face for a long moment. "Eliot, you sure you want to go down this road? Some doors, once you open them, you can't close again." "The door's already open," I said. "I just need to see what's behind it." Phil sighed and pulled out his own phone. "My nephew Jake works in IT. He might know some tricks. But Eliot, whatever you find, you didn't hear it from me." 20 minutes later, Jake arrived at the hardware store. He was 22, worked for a tech company in Portland, and had the kind of casual expertise with electronics that made me feel ancient. He looked at Lila's phone with professional interest. "This is pretty new," he said, "but if you can get into her laptop or iPad, sometimes people sync their passwords across devices." I hadn't thought of that. "We have a shared iPad at home." "Perfect. If she's logged into her iCloud account on there, we might be able to access her messages remotely." The three of us drove back to my house. The iPad was on the kitchen counter, and sure enough, it was logged into Lila's iCloud account. Jake's fingers flew across the screen with practiced efficiency. "Okay, I'm seeing multiple message threads," he said after a few minutes. "Most of them look like work stuff, but there's one thread that's, well, it's not about architecture." He handed me the iPad. The message thread was with someone listed as V in her contacts. I scrolled up to see the conversation history, and my 15-year marriage crumbled in real time. The messages went back 3 months. They started professionally enough, discussing some kind of property development project. But by the second week, the tone had shifted. By the third week, they were planning secret meetings. By the fourth week, they were planning much more than meetings. "Jesus," Phil muttered, reading over my shoulder. The most recent messages were from yesterday. V had booked a room at the Seaside Motel off Route 1, about 20 miles north of Portland. Lila had responded with heart emojis and promises that made my stomach turn. "There's more," Jake said quietly. He'd been exploring the message history. "Look at this thread with someone named Monica." I opened the Monica thread and found a different kind of betrayal. Monica wasn't just enabling Lila's affair, she was actively encouraging it. The messages revealed that Monica had been covering for Lila, providing alibis, even helping her shop for lingerie. "She thinks you're clueless," Jake said, pointing to a message from 3 days ago. Monica asked if she was worried about you finding out, and Lila wrote, "Eliot's too buried in his wood projects to notice if I moved out completely." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been working extra hours lately, trying to build up the business, thinking I was providing for our future. Meanwhile, my wife had been planning her exit strategy. "Who's V?" Phil asked. I scrolled through the messages until I found a full name, Victor Hale. I knew that name. He was a real estate developer who'd been buying up properties around Riverton, flipping houses and building upscale condos. I'd seen his picture in the local paper, standing next to his red Tesla at various ribbon-cutting ceremonies. "That son of a bitch," I said. Phil put a hand on my shoulder. "What are you going to do?" I looked around the kitchen that Lila and I had renovated together 5 years ago. I'd built the cabinets myself, installed the hardwood floors, painted every wall. This house was supposed to be our forever home, the place where we'd grow old together. "I'm going to think," I said, "and then I'm going to make sure she regrets underestimating me." Jake cleared the iPad's history and left, promising to keep quiet about what he'd helped me discover. Phil stayed for another hour, making sure I wasn't going to do anything stupid. "Revenge is a dish best served cold," he said as he was leaving. Don't let anger make you do something you'll regret. I won't, I promised. But I also won't let her make a fool of me. After Phil left, I sat in my garage workshop, surrounded by the smell of wood and the tools of my trade. I had always been a methodical person, someone who planned carefully and executed precisely. Building custom furniture required patience, attention to detail, and the ability to see the finished product before you made the first cut. Destroying a cheating wife's life would require the same skills. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical for October in Maine. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Lila's phone, which Jake had successfully unlocked the night before. Now I could see everything. Every text, every photo, every lie she'd told over the past 3 months. The affair with Victor Hale had started professionally. He'd contacted Riverside Design Associates about a potential project, some upscale condos he wanted to build on the waterfront. Lila had been assigned as the project manager. Their first meeting was at the Anchor Inn, Riverton's nicest restaurant, supposedly to discuss zoning requirements and architectural plans. By the second meeting, they were discussing much more than building codes. I scrolled through weeks of messages, watching my marriage dissolve in real time. Victor was smooth, I had to give him that. He knew exactly what to say to make Lila feel sophisticated and desired. He complimented her intelligence, her ambition, her beauty. He made her feel like she was settling for a small-town life with a small-town husband. "You deserve so much more than this," he'd written after their third meeting. "A woman with your talents shouldn't be stuck in a place like Riverton." Lila had eaten it up. "Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating here," she'd replied, "like I'm meant for bigger things." The messages grew more intimate from there. Secret lunch meetings became afternoon hotel visits. Victor had rented a luxury apartment in Portland's Arts District, and Lila had been spending her late work nights there, sometimes twice a week. What made it worse was how calculated it all was. This wasn't some passionate affair that had spiraled out of control. Lila had been methodical about it, creating elaborate lies and cover stories. She'd even opened a separate credit card to pay for new clothes and lingerie, hiding the statements from me. I found photos she'd sent to Victor, taken in our bedroom while I was working in the garage. The betrayal of that hit me harder than anything else. She'd been planning her escape while I was 20 feet away, building furniture for our future. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Having amazing time at spa. Massage was incredible. Love you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then checked her location on the Find My iPhone app. She wasn't at any spa in Portland. She was at the Seaside Motel, exactly where her messages with Victor had indicated she'd be. I screenshot everything, every message, every photo, every lie. If this was going to end badly, I wanted documentation. Around noon, I drove to Phil's hardware store. Saturday was always busy, with weekend warriors stocking up on supplies for home improvement projects. Phil was helping a customer select paint colors when I walked in, but he caught my eye and nodded toward the back office. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said when we were alone. I didn't. I showed him some of the messages I'd discovered. "It's worse than I thought. This isn't just an affair, Phil. She's been planning to leave me for months." Phil read through the messages, his expression growing darker. "Victor Hale, huh? That guy's a real piece of work. He tried to buy the Brennan property last year, told old Mrs. Brennan. She was stupid for holding on to a worthless piece of land. She threw him off her porch with a broom." "What else do you know about him?" "Rich boy from Boston. Thinks he's going to turn Riverton into some kind of upscale resort town. Drives that red Tesla like he's God's gift to Maine. Lives in a fancy apartment in Portland, but he's been sniffing around properties here." I thought about the messages I'd read, Victor's promises to take Lila away from her boring life in Riverton. "He's using her for the inside information on zoning and development opportunities." "Probably, and she's too blinded by his money and attention to see it." Phil leaned back in his chair. "What's your plan?" "I'm still working on that. But first, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. How long has this been going on? Who else knows about it? What she's planning for our divorce." "You think she's planning to divorce you?" I showed him another message thread I'd found, this one between Lila and a divorce attorney in Portland. She'd had a consultation 2 weeks ago, discussing asset division and alimony. According to the messages, she was planning to file papers after the first of the year. "She's been setting me up," I said, "working late nights that were really dates with Victor, building a case that I'm an inattentive husband who cares more about his business than his marriage." Phil whistled low. "That's cold, even for Lila." It was cold, but it was also stupid. Lila had always underestimated me, treating me like the simple craftsman who was lucky to have married above his station. She'd forgotten that building a successful business required intelligence, planning, and the ability to outmaneuver competitors. "I need to visit Monica," I said. Phil raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's wise?" Monica's been covering for her, helping with alibis. But Monica's also a gossip who can't keep a secret to save her life. If I play this right, I can get her to tell me things Lila doesn't want me to know. And if you play it wrong, then I'll know where Monica's loyalties really lie. I left Phil's store and drove across town to Monica's apartment complex. She lived in one of those modern developments that had sprouted up around Riverton in the past decade, all granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, but no character. Her BMW was in the parking lot, which meant she was home despite supposedly being at a spa weekend with my wife. I knocked on her door and waited. After a moment, I heard footsteps, then Monica's voice through the door. "Who is it?" "It's Eliot. I need to talk to you about Lila." There was a long pause before the door opened. Monica stood there in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked guilty, which told me everything I needed to know. "Eliot, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," I said. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. Her apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive furniture with no personality, abstract art that matched the throw pillows, the kind of place that looked like a showroom. "Lila left her work phone at home," I said, settling into her leather sectional. "I was hoping you could tell me how to reach her at the spa." Monica's face went pale. "Her work phone?" "Yeah, the iPhone she uses for business. She's been getting messages all morning, and I thought they might be urgent." "Oh." Monica sat down across from me, fidgeting with her hands. "Well, you know how spas are. They probably have a no-phone policy." "Which spa is it again? I might need to reach her directly." It's called Serenity Springs. Very exclusive. They don't like to be disturbed." I nodded, pretending to accept this obvious lie. "That makes sense. How did you guys hear about it?" "Oh, word of mouth. A friend of a friend recommended it." Monica was a terrible liar, which had always made her entertaining at parties and dangerous as a confidant. I could see her struggling to keep her story straight. "Well, I hope you both have a great time," I said, standing up. "When are you planning to head up there?" "Head up where?" "To the spa, to meet Lila." Monica's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Oh, right, later today. I'm just packing." I looked around her apartment. There was no luggage, no sign that she was preparing for a trip. "Well, don't let me keep you. Tell Lila I said hi." I left Monica's apartment with confirmation of what I already knew. She wasn't going to any spa, which meant she'd been lying to cover for Lila's affair. But Monica's obvious guilt also told me something else. She wasn't as comfortable with the deception as Lila was. That afternoon, I drove to Lila's office at Riverside Design Associates. The building was mostly empty on Saturday, but I knew Trish Kellerman would be there. Trish was Lila's coworker and, according to the office gossip I'd picked up at various company parties, her biggest rival for the next promotion. I found Trish in her office, working on architectural drawings spread across her drafting table. She looked up when I knocked on her door frame. "Eliot, what brings you here on a Saturday?" "I was hoping to surprise Lila for lunch, but Monica said she's at some spa weekend. I thought maybe you'd know more about it." Trish's expression shifted slightly. "Spa weekend?" "Yeah, someplace called Serenity Springs in Portland. Very exclusive, apparently." "Huh?" Trish set down her pencil and leaned back in her chair. "That's interesting." "Why?" "Well, Lila's been taking a lot of long lunches lately, and she mentioned she was working on a special project with a developer." "Oh, very hush-hush," she said, "but I've never heard her mention anything about spas." I felt a surge of satisfaction. Trish clearly suspected something was going on, and she wasn't happy about being left out of the loop. "What kind of developer?" I asked. "Some guy named Victor Hale. Big shot from Boston, apparently. Lila's been very secretive about the whole thing, which isn't like her. Usually she loves to brag about her important clients." "Maybe it's just confidential business stuff." Trish gave me a look that suggested she wasn't buying that explanation any more than I was. "Maybe. But Eliot, can I give you some friendly advice?" "Sure." "Pay attention to what's going on at home. Lila's been different lately. More secretive, more concerned about her appearance. She bought a whole new wardrobe last month. Said she needed to look more professional for client meetings." I thanked Trish and left the office, my suspicions confirmed by yet another source. Lila's affair wasn't as secret as she thought it was. People were noticing her changed behavior, her mysterious absences, her sudden interest in looking attractive for business meetings. That evening, I sat in my workshop and planned my next moves. I had documentation of the affair, confirmation that multiple people were either involved in covering for Lila or suspicious of her behavior, and a growing understanding of how she'd been manipulating the situation. But I also had something else. Time. Lila thought I was clueless, which meant she wouldn't be expecting me to act. She'd continue with her plans, probably becoming more careless as she got more confident. I opened my laptop and started researching Victor Hale. If I was going to destroy my wife's affair, I needed to understand exactly who I was dealing with. What I found made me smile for the first time in 24 hours. Victor Hale had enemies, lots of them. Angry property owners, dissatisfied investors, former business partners who claimed he'd cheated them. He'd left a trail of burned bridges from Boston to Portland, and he'd made the mistake of thinking a small town like Riverton would be easy to manipulate. He was about to learn otherwise. Sunday evening arrived with the kind of cold rain that makes October in Maine feel like a preview of winter. I'd spent the weekend preparing, and now I was ready for Lila's return from her fake spa weekend. At exactly 6:30, I heard the familiar sound of her BMW turning into our driveway. I was in the garage, putting the finishing touches on a maple bookshelf I'd been working on, but I could see her through the window. She sat in the car for a moment, probably checking her appearance in the rearview mirror, then grabbed her overnight bag and walked to the front door. I heard her try the key, then try it again. Then the doorbell rang. I took my time walking to the door, wiping sawdust off my hands with a shop rag. When I opened it, Lila was standing on the porch looking confused and slightly annoyed. "My key's not working," she said. "That's because I changed the locks," I replied calmly. Her confusion shifted to alarm. "What? Why would you change the locks?" "Because I found out about Victor." The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, but something in my expression must have told her it was too late for lies. "Eliot, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, but not here." I stepped aside so she could see into the hallway, where her suitcases were neatly lined up. "Your things are packed. You can pick them up." "You can't just kick me out of my own house." "Actually, I can. The house is in my name, remember? You insisted on that when we bought it, said it would be better for tax purposes." I'd never been more grateful for Lila's financial maneuvering than I was at that moment. Lila stared at the suitcases, then back at me. "This is insane. We need to talk about this like adults." "We can talk through lawyers. I've already contacted mine." That wasn't true yet, but it would be first thing Monday morning. Lila's face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, calculation, and finally desperation. "Eliot, please, and it's not what you think. Victor and I were just..." "Just what? Just planning to get married after you divorce me and take half my business? Just using inside information from your job to help him buy up properties around town? Just fucking in hotel rooms while I'm home building furniture for our future?" She flinched at the crude language. I'd never spoken to her like that before, but then again, she'd never betrayed me like this before. "How did you find out?" she asked quietly. "You left your phone, the one with all your messages to Victor and Monica." I pulled out my own phone and showed her some of the screenshots I'd taken. "Did you really think I was too stupid to figure it out?" Lila's shoulders sagged. She looked smaller suddenly, less formidable than the woman who'd been dismissing me for months. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe Victor's place? Or Monica's, since she's been such a good friend through all this?" As if on cue, a red Tesla pulled into the driveway behind Lila's BMW. Victor Hale stepped out, looking every inch the successful developer in his expensive suit and Italian shoes. He was handsome in a generic way, with the kind of artificial confidence that came from always having money. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, walking up the porch steps like he owned the place. "No problem," I said. "I was just telling Lila that she's welcome to take her things, but she doesn't live here anymore." Victor's jaw tightened. "You can't just throw your wife out on the street." "She's not really my wife anymore, is she? And I'm not throwing her anywhere. I'm simply declining to provide free housing for someone who's been cheating on me for 3 months." "You don't understand the situation," Victor said, stepping closer in what was probably meant to be an intimidating move. "Lila and I have been working together on a business project. Any personal relationship developed naturally from our professional collaboration." I almost laughed. "Is that what you call it? Professional collaboration?" I pulled out my phone again and read from one of their text exchanges. "Can't wait to get you alone tonight. I want to do things to you that your boring husband never dreamed of." Victor's face reddened. You had no right to read her private messages. She left the phone in my house. My house, my rules. Lila had been standing silently during this exchange, but now she found her voice. Eliot, we can work this out. We don't have to involve lawyers or make this ugly. It's already ugly, I said. You made it ugly when you decided to cheat on me instead of having an honest conversation about whatever problems we were having. We grew apart, she said. You were always working, always focused on your business. I felt invisible. So you decided to become visible to Victor instead of talking to me about it. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, but it did happen, and now you have to live with the consequences. Mrs. Coyle had appeared in her front yard, ostensibly to check her mailbox, but obviously to watch the drama unfold. I waved at her, and she waved back with undisguised interest. Let's take this inside, Victor said, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation. No, I said. Lila doesn't live inside anymore. If you want to talk, you can talk out here. This is ridiculous, Victor snapped. You're acting like a child. I'm acting like a man whose wife has been lying to him for 3 months. If that makes me childish, so be it. Lila started loading her suitcases into Victor's Tesla. She moved mechanically, like she was in shock. I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered the messages I'd read, the casual cruelty of her dismissal of our marriage, and the sympathy evaporated. This isn't over, Victor said as he helped Lila with the last suitcase. You're right, I agreed. It's not. They drove away, leaving me standing on my porch in the rain. Mrs. Coyle walked over to the fence between our properties. Everything all right, dear? She asked with the kind of concern that barely masked curiosity. Everything's fine, Mrs. Coyle. Just some marital difficulties. I saw that red car before, she said. The other night when Lila snuck out. I thought it was strange at the time. You were right to think so. Well, if you need anything, you just let me know. I've got a casserole in the freezer, and I make excellent coffee. I thanked her and went back inside. The house felt different without Lila's presence, but not necessarily worse. Quieter, maybe, more peaceful. I called Phil and told him what had happened. How do you feel? He asked. Angry, relieved, scared, all at the same time. That's normal. What's your next move? I'm going to make sure she regrets underestimating me. Be careful, Eliot. Don't do anything that'll hurt you in the divorce proceedings. I won't, but I'm not going to be a victim either. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about the future. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had control over my own life. Lila had been planning her exit strategy, but she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd assumed I would be passive, that I would accept whatever she decided to do. She was about to learn otherwise. Monday morning brought the kind of crisp October day that made living in Maine worthwhile, all blue skies and turning leaves. I was up early, partly from habit and partly because I'd slept better than I had in months. There's something to be said for not sharing a bed with someone who's been lying to you for 3 months. I called my lawyer first thing, a guy named Tom Bradley who'd handled the legal work when I incorporated my business. Tom was old-school Maine, the kind of attorney who wore flannel shirts under his sport coats and understood that sometimes the best legal strategy was just being smarter than the other guy. Divorce, huh? Tom said when I explained the situation. Sorry to hear it, Eliot, but it sounds like you've got your ducks in a row. I've got documentation of the affair, evidence that she's been planning this for months, and witnesses who can testify to her behavior. Good. Maine's a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still affect property division and alimony. The fact that she was planning to leave you while hiding assets will work in your favor. What about the business? Since you started it before the marriage and it's in your name, you should be able to keep most of it, especially if you can prove she had no involvement in building it up. That wouldn't be hard to prove. Lila had always treated my woodworking as a hobby that got out of hand, not a real business worthy of her attention. After I hung up with Tom, I drove to my workshop behind the house. I had 3 projects in various stages of completion, and work was the best therapy I knew. But I'd barely started sanding when my phone rang. It was Trish from Lila's office. Eliot, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I heard about what happened yesterday. News travels fast. Monica called in sick this morning, and Lila hasn't shown up at all. People are talking. I wasn't surprised. Monica had probably spent the night fielding panicked phone calls from Lila, trying to figure out how much I knew and what I was planning to do about it. What are people saying? Well, Victor Hale was supposed to have a meeting with our senior partners this morning about his development project. He canceled at the last minute, said there were complications with the deal. Interesting. Maybe Victor was realizing that his inside source at Riverside Design Associates wasn't going to be as useful now that her husband had blown up her cover. Trish, can I ask you something? How much did people around the office know about Lila and Victor? There was a pause. Honestly, more than Lila probably realized. She thought she was being discreet, but she'd been taking a lot of long lunches, coming back looking like she'd been doing more than eating sandwiches, and she'd been dressing differently, buying expensive clothes, getting her hair done more often. Did anyone say anything to her about it? Not directly, but you know how offices are. People talk. After I hung up, I realized that Lila's affair had been an open secret at her workplace. She'd thought she was being clever, but she'd actually been making herself the subject of office gossip. That kind of reputation damage would follow her, especially in a small professional community like Riverton. Around noon, Phil stopped by with sandwiches from the deli downtown. "Thought you might be too distracted to eat," he said. We sat in my workshop, eating and talking, while I worked on sanding a cherry wood dining table. Phil had always been a good friend, the kind of guy who showed up when you needed him without being asked. "So what's the plan?" he asked. "Legal divorce, clean and simple. Tom thinks I can keep the house and the business, maybe even avoid alimony if we can prove she was planning to leave anyway." That's not what I meant, and you know it. Phil was right. The legal divorce was just the beginning. Leela and Victor had humiliated me, treated me like a fool who was too stupid to see what was happening in his own marriage. They'd made a mistake in underestimating me, and I intended to make sure they understood that mistake. "Victor Hale thinks he can come into our town and take whatever he wants," I said. "Our properties, our women, our businesses. He thinks small-town people are easy marks." "And you're going to prove him wrong?" "I'm going to prove him wrong." That afternoon, I did some research. Victor's development company, Hale Properties, had been involved in several controversial projects around New England. There were complaints from investors, lawsuits from contractors, and angry articles in local newspapers about his business practices. But what interested me most was a pattern I found in his personal life. Victor had a history of getting involved with women who could help his business interests. A city planner in Boston, a zoning board member in Portsmouth, a real estate agent in Burlington. He'd dated them all, used their inside information to make profitable deals, then moved on when he'd gotten what he needed. Lila thought she was special, but she was just the latest in a long line of women Victor had manipulated for business advantage. I also found something else interesting. Victor's Tesla was leased, his Portland apartment was rented, and his company was carrying significant debt. He talked a good game about being a successful developer, but he was actually leveraged to the hilt and desperately needed his Riverton project to succeed. That evening, I got a phone call from Monica. "Eliot, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "Do we?" "Lila's a mess. She's been crying all day, saying you won't even listen to her side of the story." "What's her side of the story, Monica? That she accidentally fell into bed with Victor Hale? That she accidentally opened a secret credit card and accidentally bought lingerie for her accidentally secret boyfriend? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. She made choices, and now she's dealing with the consequences." "She loves you, Eliot. This thing with Victor, it's just a mistake." "A 3-month mistake? A mistake that involved planning to divorce me and take half my business? A mistake that involved you lying to cover for her?" Monica was quiet for a moment. "I never meant for it to go this far." "But you did help it go this far. You provided alibis, you covered for her, you encouraged her to think I was too stupid to figure it out." I thought maybe if she got it out of her system, she'd come back to you and everything would be okay." "That's not how marriage works, Monica. You don't get to cheat on your spouse and then come back when you're done playing around. So what happens now? Now she lives with her choices, and so do you." I hung up and sat in my quiet house, thinking about the life Lila and I had built together. 15 years of marriage, and she'd been willing to throw it all away for a smooth-talking developer who saw her as a business opportunity. But her betrayal had also revealed something important. I was stronger than I'd realized. For years, I'd let Lila make me feel small, like I was lucky to have married above my station. Now I understood that she was the one who'd been lucky. I'd been a faithful husband, a hard worker, a man who'd built something real with his hands and his brain. Victor Hale was about to learn that small-town people weren't as easy to manipulate as he thought, and Lila was about to learn that the boring husband she'd been so eager to leave was capable of playing hardball when necessary. The next morning brought another phone call, this time from an unknown number. "Is this Eliot Marsden?" The voice was male, professional. "Yes." "This is Detective Ray Morrison with the Riverton Police. I was wondering if you could come down to the station. We'd like to ask you a few questions." My blood went cold. "Questions about what?" "Someone reported a domestic disturbance at your address Sunday evening. We just need to get your statement for our records." I knew exactly who had made that report. Victor Hale was trying to make me look like the aggressor, probably hoping to use it against me in the divorce proceedings. "I'll be right there," I said. The police station was a small brick building downtown, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Detective Morrison was a guy I'd gone to high school with, which worked in my favor. "Sorry about this, Eliot," he said when I arrived, "but we got a complaint that you threatened your wife and her friends Sunday night." "I didn't threaten anyone, Ray. I told my cheating wife that she couldn't live in my house anymore and her boyfriend didn't like it." "That's what I figured. But the guy who called it in, Victor Hale, he said you were aggressive and threatening violence." "Did he mention that he's been sleeping with my wife for 3 months?" Ray's expression shifted. "No, he left that part out." I showed Ray some of the text messages I'd screenshot from Lila's phone, explaining how I'd discovered the affair and decided to end the marriage. "So when you told her to leave, you weren't threatening her?" "I was exercising my legal right to control who lives in my house. The house is in my name, Ray. I have every right to decide who gets to stay there." Ray nodded and made some notes. "That's what I thought. Sounds like Mr. Hale was trying to make trouble for you." "He was, and it's not going to be the last time." After I left the police station, I felt a surge of anger at Victor's underhanded tactics. He was trying to manipulate the system, using false reports and legal threats to intimidate me. It was time to show him that two could play that game. The annual Riverton Lobster Festival was scheduled for the following Saturday, and I'd been looking forward to it for weeks before my world imploded. Now, as I walked through the downtown streets lined with vendor booths and carnival rides, I had a different kind of anticipation. Lila would be there. She'd never missed the festival in all the years we'd been together, and her pride wouldn't let her hide away like she'd done something wrong. Victor would probably be with her, playing the role of supportive boyfriend while secretly calculating how to minimize the damage to his business reputation. I was right. I spotted them at the wine and beer garden that had been set up in the town square, sitting at a high-top table with Monica and another couple I didn't recognize. Lila was wearing a new dress I'd never seen before, something expensive and sophisticated that was probably meant to show everyone how much better her life was now. She saw me approaching, and her face went pale. Victor followed her gaze, and his jaw tightened. The other people at the table looked confused, sensing tension, but not understanding its source. "Eliot," Lila said as I walked up to their table. "I didn't expect to see you here." "It's my town, too," I replied pleasantly. "I've been coming to this festival for 20 years. "Of course. I just meant—" She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. Victor stood up, probably thinking his height and expensive clothes would intimidate me. "I think you should leave us alone." "I think you should mind your own business," I replied. But then again, minding your own business has never been your strong suit, has it? Several people at nearby tables had started to notice the confrontation. In a small town like Riverton, public drama was better entertainment than anything the carnival could provide. "There's no need to make a scene," Lila said quietly. "I'm not making a scene. I'm just saying hello to my wife and her boyfriend at a public event." The word boyfriend carried across the wine garden like a stone thrown into still water. Conversation stopped, heads turned, and I could see people pulling out their phones to record whatever was about to happen. "Estranged wife," Victor corrected, like that somehow made the situation more respectable. "Estranged because she's been cheating with you for 3 months," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But I'm sure you've told everyone it's more complicated than that." Lila's face was burning red now. "Eliot, please don't do this." "Do what? Tell the truth? I thought you'd appreciate honesty since you've been so committed to it lately." Victor stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. "You need to back off, right now." "Or what? You'll call the police again and file another false report?" That got a reaction from the crowd. Nothing spread faster in a small town than the news that someone had been making trouble with false accusations. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victor said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Sure you do. You called in a domestic disturbance complaint Sunday night, trying to make me look like the bad guy for kicking my cheating wife out of my house." Monica, who'd been silent up to this point, suddenly found her voice. "Lila, maybe we should go." "Good idea," I agreed. "Take her to your place, Monica." "Oh, wait, you can't. You told me you were going to a spa weekend, remember? Hard to keep track of all the lies, isn't it?" Monica's mouth opened and closed without sound. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. "You're embarrassing yourself," Victor said, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October air. "Am I? Let me tell you what's embarrassing, Victor. What's embarrassing is being a 40-year-old man who has to seduce other people's wives to get inside information for his failing business deals." That hit home. Victor's face went white, then red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Hale Properties is leveraged to the hilt, isn't it? You need this Riverton development to work, or you're going to lose everything. That's why you targeted Lila, because she had access to zoning information and development plans. The crowd was completely focused on us now. I could see Phil at the edge of the gathering, grinning like he was watching his favorite movie. Lila thought she was special, I continued, but she's just the latest in a long line of women you've used for business advantage. A city planner in Boston, a zoning board member in Portsmouth, a real estate agent in Burlington. You've got a type, don't you, Victor? Lila turned to stare at Victor, and I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. What is he talking about? He's lying, Victor said, but he wouldn't meet her gaze. Am I? Google is a wonderful thing, Lila. You should try researching your boyfriend's romantic history sometime. Victor had heard enough. He lunged at me, throwing a wild punch that I saw coming from a mile away. I stepped aside and he stumbled past me, crashing into an empty table and sending beer glasses flying. The crowd gasped and several people started cheering. Mrs. Coyle, who'd appeared from somewhere, was filming the whole thing with her phone. That's assault, Victor shouted, scrambling to his feet. That's self-defense, corrected a voice from the crowd. Detective Morrison pushed through the gathering, looking annoyed. I saw the whole thing, Hale. You threw the first punch. Victor looked around desperately, probably realizing that his attempt to make me look like the aggressor had backfired spectacularly. He was harassing us, Lila said, finally finding her voice. He was having a conversation in a public place, Detective Morrison replied. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. He was saying horrible things about Victor's business. True things, apparently, since Mr. Hale felt the need to get violent about them. Victor straightened his expensive shirt and tried to salvage some dignity. This isn't over. You're right, I agreed. It's not. Victor grabbed Lila's arm and started pulling her toward the exit. She looked back at me once, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 15 years ago, confused and scared and realizing she'd made a terrible mistake. But the moment passed, and she let Victor lead her away. The crowd began to disperse, but not before several people came up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry about what had happened. Mrs. Coyle showed me the video she'd taken, which clearly showed Victor attacking first and me defending myself. This is going straight to Facebook, she said with obvious delight. Phil appeared at my elbow. Well, that was entertaining. It was necessary, I replied. Victor's been trying to control the narrative, make me look like the bad guy. Now everyone knows what really happened. What's your next move? I'm going to finish what he started. That evening, I sat in my workshop and planned my next steps. The public confrontation at the festival had served its purpose. Everyone in town now knew that Lila had cheated on me with Victor Hale, and that Victor was the kind of man who tried to solve problems with his fists. But it had also revealed something important. Lila was starting to have doubts about Victor. When I'd mentioned his history with other women, I'd seen uncertainty in her eyes. She was beginning to realize that she might not be as special to him as she'd thought. That doubt was something I could work with. Sunday morning brought a phone call from Tom Bradley, my lawyer. Saw the video from yesterday, he said. Nice work. You saw it? Everyone in town's seen it. Your neighbor, Mrs. Coyle, posted it on Facebook, and it's been shared about 100 times. Victor Hale doesn't look very good in it. Good. What does this mean for the divorce? It means Lila's going to have a hard time claiming you were abusive or threatening. The video clearly shows you defending yourself against her boyfriend's attack. And the property settlement? Even better now. Her public affair and Victor's assault make it unlikely she'll get any sympathy from a judge. After I hung up, I realized that yesterday's confrontation had accomplished more than I'd hoped. Not only had it exposed Victor and Lila's relationship to the entire town, but it had also created legal evidence that would help me in the divorce proceedings. Victor had played right into my hands, but I wasn't done with him yet. The following week brought a series of developments that showed me just how much damage the festival confrontation had done to Victor and Lila's plans. First, Trish called to tell me that Victor had withdrawn his development proposal from Riverside Design Associates. He came in Monday morning and said there had been complications with the project, she explained, asked for all his files back and canceled his contract. What did your bosses say? They weren't happy. It was going to be a big project, worth a lot of money to the firm. They're asking questions about why he pulled out so suddenly. I had a pretty good idea why. Victor's business depended on his reputation as a successful developer, and his public meltdown at the festival had damaged that reputation. He couldn't afford to be associated with a messy divorce scandal, especially in a small town where everyone would be watching his every move. Second, Phil told me that Victor had been asking around town about selling his options on several properties he'd been planning to develop. Word is, he's having cash flow problems, Phil said. Needs to liquidate some assets quickly. That confirmed my suspicions about Victor's financial situation. He'd been counting on the Riverton project to solve his money problems, but now that it had fallen through, he was scrambling to avoid bankruptcy. Third, and most satisfying, Monica called to tell me that Lila was having second thoughts about her relationship with Victor. She's been asking questions about his other girlfriends, Monica said. Wants to know if what you said at the festival was true. And what did you tell her? I told her to ask Victor directly. Did she? Yeah. He got angry and accused her of not trusting him. They had a big fight about it. I could picture that conversation. Victor's whole approach depended on making women feel special and desired. Once they started questioning his motives, his charm offensive fell apart. But the most interesting development came Thursday evening, when Lila showed up at my door. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup was smudged, and she was wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt. This wasn't the sophisticated woman who'd been trying to impress everyone at the festival. Can we talk? She asked. I considered saying no, but curiosity won out. 5 minutes. We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd spent countless evenings watching TV and planning our future together. Now it felt like a museum of our failed marriage. I made a mistake, she said without preamble. Which mistake? Cheating on me, lying to me for 3 months, or planning to divorce me and take half my business? She flinched. All of it. I was confused and unhappy, and Victor made me feel like I could have a different life. And now? Now I realized that the life I had with you wasn't so bad. I almost laughed. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of our marriage, Lila. I know how it sounds. But Eliot, I think Victor was using me. The things you said at the festival about his other girlfriends and his business problems, I think they're true. Of course they're true. I don't make accusations I can't back up. She was quiet for a moment, staring at her hands. He's been different since the festival. Angry all the time, blaming me for ruining his deal with Riverside. He says if I hadn't been so careless about hiding our relationship, none of this would have happened. So now it's your fault? That's what he says, and he's been mean, Eliot. Really mean. He called me stupid for leaving my phone at home, said I was a small-town nobody who should be grateful he paid attention to me. I felt a flash of anger at Victor's treatment of her, which surprised me. Despite everything she'd done, I didn't like the idea of anyone treating Lila badly. What do you want from me? I asked. I want to come home. I want to try to fix our marriage. It's too late for that. Is it? We were together for 15 years, Eliot. That has to count for something. It counted for something 3 months ago before you started cheating on me. Now it's just history. Tears started running down her cheeks. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm asking anyway. I looked at this woman I'd loved for so long, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even pity. Just a kind of empty recognition that whatever we'd had together was gone. The divorce papers will be ready next week, I said. Tom Bradley will be in touch with your lawyer. I don't have a lawyer yet. Then you better get one. She sat there for another minute, probably hoping I'd change my mind. When it became clear that wasn't going to happen, she stood up and walked to the door. For what it's worth, she said, I really am sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this. After she left, I called Phil and told him about the conversation. How do you feel? He asked. Relieved. I thought seeing her might bring back old feelings, but it didn't. I'm done with her, Phil. Really done. Good for you. What about Victor? What about him? You going to let him get away with everything he did? I thought about that. Victor had tried to steal my wife, ruin my reputation, and destroy my marriage. He'd used false police reports and public intimidation to try to control the situation. Even now, he was apparently taking his frustrations out on Lila, blaming her for his own failures. No, I said finally. I'm not going to let him get away with it. Friday afternoon, I drove to Portland to visit Victor's apartment building. It was one of those converted warehouse developments in the Arts District, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures designed to appeal to young professionals who wanted to live somewhere that looked cool on Instagram. I found Victor's Tesla in the parking garage and took some pictures of the license plate and VIN number. Then I went upstairs and knocked on his door. He answered wearing a bathrobe and looking like he'd been drinking. His apartment was a mess, with empty bottles and takeout containers scattered around. What the hell do you want? He asked. I wanted to see how you were doing. Heard you've been having some business problems? Get out of here before I call the police. Go ahead. I'm sure Detective Morrison would love to hear from you again. Victor's face darkened, but he didn't reach for his phone. I also wanted to thank you. I continued. Thank me for what? For showing me who my wife really was. If you hadn't seduced her, I might have wasted more years in a marriage that was already over. Lila came to me, Victor said. She was unhappy with you long before we met. Maybe, but you saw an opportunity and you took it. That's what you do, isn't it? You find people you can use and you use them. You don't know anything about me. I know you're broke. I know your development company is about to go under. I know you've been using women to get inside information for your business deals. Victor stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. You think you're so smart. Smart enough to see through you, smart enough to document everything you and Lila did, smart enough to make sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of man you are. You ruined everything, he said, his voice rising. I had a good thing going here until you started interfering. You ruined everything when you decided to cheat with my wife. I just made sure there were consequences. Victor raised his hand like he was going to hit me, then seemed to remember how badly that had worked out at the festival. He let his hand drop. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. You're finished in this town, Victor. Nobody's going to do business with you after what happened. Your reputation is shot, your money's gone, and the woman you threw away your integrity for doesn't want anything to do with you anymore. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in his doorway in his bathrobe, looking like the failure he'd always been underneath the expensive clothes and fake confidence. Saturday morning, I was in my workshop when Phil arrived with coffee and donuts from downtown. Heard Victor Hale left town, he said. Really? Yep. Packed up his Tesla and drove away yesterday evening. Landlord says he broke his lease, forfeited his deposit. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Victor had finally realized that he couldn't win this fight, that he'd bitten off more than he could chew when he'd decided to mess with my marriage. What about Lila? Still in town, staying at Monica's place, but Monica's not happy about it. Word is, Lila's been crying and drinking and generally making herself a nuisance. She'll figure something out. You really don't care what happens to her? I thought about that question. 3 months ago, I would have done anything to protect Lila, to make her happy, to save our marriage. Now she was just someone I used to know. I care that she's safe and has somewhere to live, I said. But beyond that, her problems are her own. Phil nodded approvingly. Good for you. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Lila didn't contest any of the terms Tom Bradley had negotiated. She kept her car and her personal belongings. I kept the house and the business. No alimony, no ongoing financial obligations. She'd found a job with an architectural firm in Augusta and moved there shortly after the divorce was final. Monica told people that Lila was starting fresh and focusing on her career, but everyone knew the real reason she'd left town. As for Victor, I heard he'd moved back to Boston and was working for someone else's development company. His own business had gone bankrupt, just as I'd suspected it would. 6 months after that terrible Friday night when I'd discovered Lila's second phone, I was sitting in my workshop putting the finishing touches on a custom dining room set. The pieces were beautiful, made from local maple with hand-carved details that would last for generations. Mrs. Coyle knocked on the workshop door, carrying a plate of cookies and wearing a huge smile. I have news, she announced. What kind of news? Victor Hale was arrested in Boston last week. Fraud charges, something about falsifying investment documents. I set down my sandpaper and looked at her. Really? Really. It was in the Boston Globe. Apparently he'd been running some kind of scheme for years, taking money from investors for projects that didn't exist. I thought about Victor's expensive clothes, his leased Tesla, his rented apartment. All of it had been a facade, designed to convince people he was more successful than he really was. Well, I said, I guess that explains a lot. Mrs. Coyle handed me the cookies and headed back to her house, probably eager to share this news with the rest of the neighborhood. I sat in my workshop, surrounded by the honest work of my hands, and reflected on how much my life had changed. The marriage I'd thought was permanent had turned out to be built on lies and false promises. The woman I'd loved had been willing to throw away 15 years together for a man who turned out to be a criminal. But I'd survived it all. More than survived, I'd thrived. My business was busier than ever, I had good friends who'd stood by me, and I had the satisfaction of knowing I'd handled a terrible situation with dignity and intelligence. Victor Hale had come to Riverton thinking he could take whatever he wanted from small-town people who wouldn't fight back. He'd learned otherwise. Lila had thought she could cheat on her husband and face no consequences, that I was too passive to stand up for myself. She'd learned otherwise, too. I picked up my sandpaper and went back to work, humming quietly to myself. Outside, the Maine autumn was painting the trees in brilliant colors, and inside my workshop, I was building something beautiful and lasting.